Do you love to travel, but you only have 2 weeks of vacation a year? Today we're talking to Jen Ruiz, who's planning on showing us that it's 100% possible to travel more while still holding down one of those pesky things called a full-time job, because taking a vacation is good for the soul. Welcome to the Solo Female Travelers Show. In today's episode, Jen's going to show us how to take our vacation days now and show you exactly how it's done. Did you know that more of half Americans don't take their vacation time every year, and those who do feel guilty about it? It's a shame because taking a vacation can actually improve your mental, your emotional, and your physical well-being and increase your productivity, because what's good for you is good for your company. So in today's webinar, we're talking about how to get over the guilt of asking for leave, finding creative ways to negotiate for more time off, learning how to take a sick day without jeopardizing your job, and just generally making the most of your limited time off. And we have an expert with us. Jen Ruiz is a lawyer turned travel blogger. She's an author and public speaker. She blogs at Jen on a Jet Plane and wrote a book titled You Need a Vacation, How to Travel with a Full-Time Job, which is available on Amazon. So let's get started.
Well, welcome everybody. Like I said, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Jen Ruiz, and I am a lawyer turned travel blogger. So I used to practice law. I practiced law for 5 years. I worked at a trial court for a year. I worked at a private firm for 2 years doing Social Security disability law. And then for the last 2 years, I worked as a nonprofit attorney before transitioning to remote work full time, which I have then been doing. And part of what sparked my transition was a crazy 12 trips in 12 months challenge that I ended up taking in 2017, the year before my 30th birthday. I'm so glad you're loving these live videos. I am too. And I decided that I wanted to not worry about being, married with a husband or a child or anything like that by 30. Like, I just wanted to really do something for me, something fun, something that was separate from all of my professional accomplishments that I felt I could do on my own. So I set out to take one trip every month, thinking that just putting all my energy into that and planning that and figuring out how I could make it work with my schedule at work and with all of my obligations and with days off would keep me so busy that I wouldn't have any kind of anxiety over this big milestone birthday. And I had no idea that it was going to lead me to this whole other life path and eventually become like a calling for me. But at the time, I just wanted to do something to divert myself. And so I started off, my first trip was in Athens. And from there, I went to Italy. I went to Iceland, Toronto, that I was able to take my family. And we had actually a brunch prepared by a chopped champion, which was amazing, that I'll never forget. And it's moments like that that make traveling so worthwhile. And I just got to do so many cool things, Cuba, Thailand, Cambodia. I went to Angkor Wat. I, played with elephants and never riding them. Please don't ride elephants, and spread the word to all of your friends. But it was just such a wonderful time being able to see the world on my own. I did most of these trips alone because I found that as a young professional, it was hard to get friends who also had the time off, who also had the same interest to go, as far as you wanted to go, to the same places, and who were able to buy tickets at the same time. If there was a really good flight deal, you can't wait and run that through 20 people. Like, you kind of have to just buy it and be like, oh my God, I'm going to Thailand for $80. Like, this is happening. And that happened for me. So, and I went alone because you have to take advantage, and that's my mantra. So I was able to actually take 20 trips in 12 months. I actually wrote a book about finding affordable flights, and I transitioned to blogging full time at my site, Jen on a Jet Plane. Since then, I have given 2 TEDx talks. I have written 4 books now. My 4th book just launched earlier this week, and I have been featured by the Washington Post, Huffington Post, and ABC News, and a ton of other different outlets that I'm so grateful have taken an interest in the story, not just from the perspective of, being able to afford travel, but also being able to embrace travel as a solo female young professional who finally feels like they've earned the right to really have the fruits of their labor and go out and see the world and enjoy life, which is something that I was lacking for those first couple of years as a young attorney, where as an associate, you're just really so focused on being established and keeping this job because, you know, everybody else is vying for a position and you want to really make use of this degree and you feel the pressure of student loans. So that can be really difficult. And for me, when I finally, after, you know, 5 years of that, I was like, I think I've earned the right to start traveling and to start doing what it is I want to do versus hoping that one day I'll be able to do it, you know? And that's how I'm here today. So I'm so excited to talk to you more about how I have managed to do all of this. I'm based out of Puerto Rico currently, but at the time I was based out of South Florida, which was very helpful for me because I did have major airports, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Orlando, all within a 2-hour drive of me.
That's awesome that you managed to get so many trips in, like in between having a full-time job. And obviously that's the whole point of the session, right? I remember like my bosses used to get so frustrated at me because I was the one who was always like, so I'm going on another trip now. I need those like 4 weeks, or like I'd always kind of like dip into leave that I didn't have and kind of try and like retroactively use it for like next year, and they'd get like super, super annoyed with me. So I'm sure I wasn't exactly like a favorite employee, but that's epic that you managed to take that many trips while still, yeah, working just kind of a traditional career.
Thank you. And I mean, just even hearing you say that, I mean, I know that we have audiences from everywhere, a lot of people from Australia, the UK, but you have to know, and I think we can go to the next slide for this one, that in the US, we really suffer. They call us the no vacation nation because like even there in passing, you said that you would ask your boss for 4 weeks. At 4 weeks, you better be having a child. Like there better be a reason why you need that kind of time off when it comes to US vacation time. It's just unheard of. Most people get on average 10 days. Yes, asking for time off, I can relate. It's very difficult because you do, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but you feel guilty asking for the time off. So the average American gets 10 days a year and they don't really get that many holidays. You know, I feel like as time has gone by, and tell me if I'm alone on this, but they've taken more and more of our holidays. Like we used to have President's Day and Columbus Day, and like now all of those holidays are gone. Like what were
no. It is interesting because like I'm from Australia and we have a very different culture, and my husband's actually from America, so I then moved to America, and yeah, we have a very different work culture because I grew up in Australia and we have 4 weeks off of paid, 4 weeks of paid leave off. And that's just kind of expected. You expect that. You come to take that for granted even because you don't realize that other countries in the world don't have the same kind of employment culture. So then I moved to the US, and then, yeah, you're expected to work even kind of like full hours, 5 days a week, no weeks off, and even like over Christmas and New Year's. And they do. They're like, well, so for instance, my husband came to Australia for 12 months to when we started dating because we met as solo travelers and did the whole long distance thing. But his boss basically said to him, like, if you want to keep taking time off, like you won't have a job when you come back. Like it's either you choose to travel or you don't have a job. So yeah, there's definitely, I was quite shocked by that cultural difference. So yeah, it's definitely been interesting for me from Australia to get the perspective from around the world as well.
I'm sorry for that. I apologize for our culture.
Oh, no.
We're workaholics. I see some users saying they'd ask for unpaid time off and still get attitude. One user's in education and can only fly during expensive summer, winter holidays. We'll talk about that. That's another thing where I can kind of help you look for cheap ways to do that, because there are people that are limited with when they can take time off. I love visiting Australia too for those same reasons. I think the rest of the world just generally understands that it's good to have a balance and that you will have more productivity. Traveling is my first full-time job and fixing airplanes is my next full-time job. It's great if you can mix those positions, you know? I think that's the sweet spot when you make your job something that you really enjoy. But in the US, it's tough. And because we have this credit lifestyle that we live on, and we want to kind of have these status things like a big mortgage or a big car payment, you know, it's hard for people to get out of this path that they've carved for themselves. And so because they don't want to risk their status at the job, because they don't want to ruffle any feathers, you know, 54% 90% of people leave time on the table. They're just not taking those 10 limited days, that quarter of what you get. They're not even taking that. And of the people that do take their time, 2 out of 3 will still be working while on vacation. So we don't have that concept of unplugging. Coworkers do try to make you feel guilty. And I think that's part of why we do that and why we still connect even when we're on vacation, because we feel guilty, right? We feel like we have to be connected all the time. I think it was France that actually instituted a law where you couldn't email people after a certain time for work. And that just doesn't exist in the US, right? Because time is money. And the more responsive you are, that means you're a better worker. So if you're up at midnight responding to emails from your boss, that means that you are doing a great job, right? And I've seen that in the industry, in all industries. And so we feel guilty even taking those little days off, even if it's just a single day. Like we feel like we have to be tied to the phone, responsive, able to, take anything that comes up and react to it even when we're not there. And it's something that we'll discuss because it's not necessarily reciprocal guilt, right? Like nobody feels that way if you're not there or if they have to replace you. You're not necessarily, you're never going to have that same kind of undying loyalty from your employer that you're giving them, where you're even giving them your free time that you've earned off. So feel okay about disconnecting because you earn that time off, because you need that time off for your sanity, right? To come back to those coworkers that were already giving you grief for taking time off in the first place. You need that to really regroup, balance yourself, and be a better employee. And that leads me to my next point in my next slide.
Awesome. I think too, I've noticed that, do you, and you might be covering this shortly too, but do you separate your coworkers from your private Facebook page? And for instance, because obviously if you're connected, and I think everybody nowadays, it's a really big cultural thing to just connect with everybody that you're even an acquaintance with. But then obviously that can lead way for a lot of resentment between your coworkers if they're seeing you constantly take trips or post photos and they're like, well, I'm at work, why are you off traveling type thing. Do you think that there's any way of maybe putting limited access to your social media pages for coworkers or colleagues, or would that be a good idea?
I think that's a great question, Meg, because you don't want to acknowledge that there's that resentment going on, but there can be, and it can lead to passive aggressiveness in the workplace, which we see so commonly. Sometimes my boss makes me feel it. Airplanes won't fly without me. There can be a lot of that. And so I think a couple of things. You always have the option of keeping them separate, of just not accepting that friend request, of not being part of it. I think in today's world, it's a little bit more difficult because we're so connected, because we're linked by our workplaces, because we have colleagues that maybe you are a little bit closer with and you're friends with, and then you comment on their things and they see you. So it can be tough to keep that separation. I think if you are going to accept friend requests from your boss, from your coworkers, use your filters very liberally. So the good thing about Facebook particularly is that if you're posting something, let's say that you just went on vacation, you're coming back, you're posting 50 pictures, gorgeous, of you having a grand old time around Europe, but you don't want to rub that into your coworkers. You can filter it so they don't see it. You can filter it so your boss doesn't see it. You can make it, private so that only a certain group of people see it. And those settings will remain by default every time too. So you can go back and just, if you're posting something else, kind of pick that up. So that's a good way. But I always, if it's something that I know I don't necessarily want to even open the door for, if it's a sick day, and we'll talk about that, and I'll just completely not post anything. I'll just go radio silent on social media, and I'll be okay enjoying my time for me. Versus feeling like I have to share it, because I do think you have to be careful about what you post, how you are, being professional, and just use those filters liberally. And at the end of the day, it's your account. So you shouldn't feel bad. You shouldn't feel any pressure about filtering it, about moderating it, about doing what you need to be comfortable on that space.
Love this. We just got a comment. On the other hand, you can use your dramatic exhausted face as an excuse to make your boss realize that you badly need a break. I agree. Yeah.
How's that?
And then we've also had a comment. Sometimes being a good worker is a disadvantage. Totally vibe with that. It's that kind of age-old thing of you do a mediocre job and they don't ask you to do more tasks and have the high expectations of you.
But I want to say this, you really, and we're going to get to the benefits right now. You have to draw the line for yourself and really take the time for yourself, because I've seen good workers, especially in the legal field. I've seen really loyal workers that have been there for 20 years, that have, done everything and haven't ever taken, time off, haven't asked for a raise, and have grown resentful of it over time. And these great people that are really loyal to the companies end up not living a life that they're really happy with. And there's a lot of passive aggressiveness and tensions boiling underneath the surface. So I think you owe it to yourself, especially if you're a good employee, to know that what you're worth and to take the time that's owed to you. So let's talk about why it's so good to take a vacation. The vacation, you're getting a little bit ahead of me. But
sorry about that.
No problem. So this is just, I was just going to talk through this one. There's not really any bullet points, but I just wanted to note that in general, and my book will have a lot of studies to take you through this and citations, but it is shown that vacations make you more productive, make you happier. You get anticipation just from planning your vacation. So just from knowing that you have a vacation planned for 6 months down the road, even if it is during that July time where everybody's going as well, you're going to get excited thinking about that, daydreaming about that. It's going to help get you through those mundane aspects of your day-to-day. And when you come back, you're more energized, you produce more, you're more efficient in your work. It improves your mood. It improves, there's all kinds of studies. There's college students that have been tested right before they take exams, that have gone out into nature and have been able to relax and unwind and come back and see how they perform. So you can get so many benefits, even from just a 24-hour day trip somewhere. Traveling is part of my job benefits, and that makes me love my job. You're very lucky to have that job. I agree with you completely. Every time I come back from a vacation, I feel like a new me. I completely agree with that. That's the whole point. It rejuvenates you, and it doesn't have to be far. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be grand and luxurious. It could be something as small as taking a new hike and taking a day to explore a new area that you haven't been to before, going to a museum for a day if you like to be indoors, air conditioned. I do in Puerto Rico right now. It's hot. So I would recommend doing that, because there are scientifically proven benefits, your performance, your mental health, your wellness, your physical well-being. It actually reduces your chance of, heart disease, related stress related injuries and diseases, because you're taking the time to reset. And there's a phrase that I use in the book that humans, like machines, sometimes just need to be turned off and turned back on again. And you need to give yourself that grace. It's okay. You cannot just run a machine nonstop. And that's going to burn a machine out. And you are a machine, the most complex machine of all, right? Like, you're the most glorious, amazing, self-thinking machine. So at least know enough to know that you have to take care of yourself and do regular maintenance and do regular check-ins with yourself and make sure that you're functioning well. You owe that to yourself. And if you do that, you will be a better employee.
I think that's like something that people really struggle with too. And like, I know I did, because like when I first started traveling, I was working like 3 different jobs while I was studying at uni, and then I would go on my trips. And then I was so good for like 2 years literally doing that. I was going on like 4 hours sleep, but then you stop, and then all of it catches up to you at the same time, and all of it hits you. And obviously that's the same with if you're just dedicated to your full-time job and you're going between that and you're not taking a break. All of it's going to build up and build up and build up and build up, and you might feel like you're fine, even for a good, as you said, like 20 years with those people who you knew who were really, really loyal to the company. But that starts to bubble up under the surface, and then the minute you let it out, then you're like, oh crap, like I have a much more resentment and I'm much more worn out than I actually realized I was. You kind of like fool yourself into believing that you're doing better than you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think just take it. I think we've convinced a lot of people. I can't wait to do this already. Let's go on a trip. Yes, I'd like the virus to just go away.
Yeah. Agreed.
And so let's talk a little bit on the next slide about how to get more leave time. So for those of you being like, this all sounds great, Jen, but I only have such limited time. I'm here in the US, we're really strict. So let's talk about how you can negotiate and when. So the very first thing you should do to get more leave time is talk about this when you're first applying for a job. So believe it or not, leave time is actually the second most important benefit to applicants after healthcare. So it's more important than retirement. It's more important than, office space. It's more important than any other kind of parking, perks, anything like that. People want to know about leave time. It's more important than insurance benefits, anything. So that is your best time, and employers expect you to negotiate when you're taking on a contract. So don't just take it at face value. If they offer you 10 days at first, you lose nothing by countering and, asking for $5,000 more and 5 extra days. And maybe you don't get the $5,000, but you get the 5 extra days. So you don't lose anything by asking at the hiring stage. Now, if you're already hired and you're thinking, okay, I missed that chance, you can also ask in lieu of a raise or a bonus. And this was something for me when I was working in the nonprofit world that became evident, because we didn't really have annual raises, and we had a year where our budget was so tight that we couldn't afford any kind of bonus or anything of the sort. And so something that they did on the regular was provide us with a week where we could take either Christmas week or New Year's week, and it wouldn't count against our days off. And that was their form of, a monetary end of year benefit. So if you have done a really good job, if you're doing a good job on a particular case or a particular client, if there's a bonus that's potentially coming your way, if you know that the office is hard up, especially now during Corona times when people are limited on budget, this is a good time to ask for those alternative benefits. So maybe you don't get that boost in monetary compensation, but you get those 2 weeks off a year, that are paid, or whatever the case may be. Or that extra week off. So that's another tactic. And then I think our next bullet point. You can also, if you're an hourly employee, so let's say you're not salaried, let's say you don't deal with clients on that basis, you wouldn't be getting bonuses or commission, maybe you can volunteer for extra events. And this was something that we had a lot, again, in the nonprofit world, where we would have events on the weekend. And if you were an hourly employee and you came out on the weekend and decided to spend 4 hours from 9 a.m. to 12, building a bike for charity, you could leave 4 hours early. You could discount that from time that you would actually have to put in during the week. So if you need a little extra time, if you want to extend your trip or do a vacation, that could be a good way. When you accumulate hours that expired within months, therefore your boss will have no excuse to say not to go, because you will use those hard-earned hours. I agree completely. We're going to talk about that as well. A lot of offices, you have to know your office policies, if it's use it or lose it. And if that's the case, then you definitely don't lose anything, and you will actually, it'll be hurtful to you to not take that initiative and take that time off, because it'll go away by the end of the year. It won't accrue, it won't roll over. So you have to know your office's policies first and foremost. And then we also had a comment about negotiating. Either you do overtime and instead money go for leave hours. So I agree, there's a lot of flexibility here, and you can play with what you ask for. Remote work is another way that you can kind of be flexible with this. And I know I'm going to encourage you to disconnect when you're traveling, but let's say that you just want a little bit more time at a destination. Possibly if you are flexible with how you get your work done, if you're somebody that's usually in front of a computer anyway, that's something, an accommodation you can ask for. At the time that I wrote this book, it was a lot more far-fetched than it is now, when remote work is something that almost everyone is adapting to. So we've shown that it is possible, that results can still occur, and that you can be a professional remotely. So previously, remote work was really reserved for people in their mid-40s, with upper graduate degrees, things of that sort. And it's really just an inability to like a lack of courage for asking and being able to make this position, because you're able to produce the same results. And so as women, I think we're especially vulnerable to that, right? We won't ask, we'll just take things at face value. Thank you for the salary that you're offering. Thank you for these benefits that you're offering. And we don't at all push back or do any kind of dance. And that's not, it's not aggressive. It's not a bad thing. It's how candidates operate. Men do this all the time. It's business. And you can do this in a very respectful way that still benefits you and still puts you across as a professional that people want to deal with, and that isn't demanding or pushy or anything like that. Just somebody that knows their worth and knows kind of creative ways that they could negotiate for things. Another thing that you can ask for is staggered vacation. So potentially you are saying, I will get this extra week or this extra 2 weeks off, but I won't take them cumulatively. This is going to be hard. Cumulatively. together. And so,
I have a couple of words like that just get me every time.
I'm going to take this for a water break.
I like totally vibe with that though, with what you're saying about like we as women, we often feel like we're being labeled as pushy or like too forward if we ask for things. But like what I realized, so I remember I went for an interview at my first ever law job and I had a trip coming up, a 3-week trip, and I got the interview literally like 2 weeks before this 3-week trip that I had. And I'm thinking, shit, like they're not going to give me the job because I'm basically they want someone to start straight away. So, but I just basically told them at the interview, look, I really would love this job. I believe I'd be an excellent candidate for it. Here's why. However, I can't start until X date. And unfortunately, that's not negotiable. I have I have personal time planned, and I usually don't say I'm going traveling or I'm going this. I just say I have personal time planned. Unfortunately, I can't move it. And I got the job. I was super surprised because she wanted a personal assistant like to start straight away. But then I guess what it came down to is that they admired just the straightforwardness. Like you don't have to be pushy, but just being transparent and straightforward, and said that they would prefer someone who was right for the job even if they had to wait for 3 weeks. So yeah, I totally vibe with that we kind of have this preconceived notion in our head that we're being pushy as women if we ask for a raise or try and negotiate or ask for time off. But you don't need to be pushy, but you can still ask the question.
Exactly. And that's the time, right, as you're getting hired to bring up any pre-existing trips because they already want you. They've already gone through the interview process. You are their candidate. They are offering you the job. They do not want to go back to another candidate and have to go through all this again. So they want you. They find you qualified. You have something that they want to add to their company. So don't feel any qualms about saying, I have these pre-existing plans. You do not have to disclose the nature of them. You do not have to say, I am going to be all up on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, getting my groove on. You just say, I have plans already for these dates. I'm available around this time, and that's that. And there's so many ways to do that without it at all being a weird thing. Again, men do this all the time and it's normal. So you don't have to make a big deal out of it, and you should absolutely ask for what you deserve. Bookending holidays and work trips is another great way. So if you already have an existing trip, I've been able to turn so many trips because when I was in Social Security law, I would go on cases all over the US, and a lot of times to like maybe not so exciting places, because like cases in Hawaii, my bosses would go to, right? 2 years, not once did I get sent to Hawaii, despite Hawaii being brought up in the interview more than once. Like that was part of the tactics that they use. We take cases in Hawaii, never once went to Hawaii. But I did get sent to Mobile, Alabama, and I did get sent to
it's kind of like a pecking list, right?
Yeah, like North Carolina, at Greenville, North Carolina. And you know what? I had a grand old time. I would find great barbecue. I would already have the rental car paid for. After I'd be done with a case, I would go and I would do other things. I hope my boss isn't watching. I'm revealing my tactic. Yeah. I mean, I was thinking the same thing. I don't think any of them are in the solo traveler group, but you never know. And
that's a nice thing. It's a private group, so what gets said here won't make it back to your boss unless they're part of the private group, obviously. But apart from that, privacy.
It's like Vegas, ladies.
Yeah, exactly.
Virtual
What
Vegas.
gets said here stays here.
Laughing at mobile. Yeah, you know what? Before I went, the only thing I thought of was Kanye's workout plan, like Mobile, Alabama. And then once I went there, I was like, this is actually very fun. There's a lot of movies that have been filmed there. There's some really good barbecue joints there. And I really think no matter where you are, it's some place that somebody else wants to come and visit. And I'm telling you, it does not matter where you are. It doesn't matter how boring you think your town is. It doesn't matter how small you think, your place is. Somebody wants to go and travel there. They really do. I've had coworkers that wanted to travel to the most, random places because they were featured in a crossword puzzle once as a clue, like in the New York Times multiple times. So you never know. And there's something to see no matter where you go. So I would take these trips to these kind of lesser known destinations, and I'd make the most out of them. I'd Yelp, best cocktails in the city, and I'd go get myself celebratory cocktails that I usually win. And then I would go and see something cool. I'd see a museum. And when I was in Nashville, I went to a honky tonk. And, I think there's really ways that you can take an existing trip where somebody's already paid for your hotel, your car, your flight, and have fun with it and make it a trip where you have that little bit of release and you don't feel guilty, and you can do these things on your own dime. You can buy the cocktails on your own dime. That's fine. But you are able to separate and still make the most of a trip, even if you're out for work. Like, you don't have to just be back in your hotel doing nothing, back to work again at 7 o'clock. Like, if you're off hours, go and enjoy yourself. And then also, bookending holidays and short-term travel and staycation. So that's what we talked about. You don't have to go far and you don't have to go long. I went to Cuba over Labor Day weekend because there was a deal that popped up, and it was like $200 round trip, a half-hour flight from South Florida. And I went for 48 hours and it was amazing. And I'm really glad that with all the restrictions that we have here as Americans, that I was able to take the time to go and really get to see this place, get to learn for myself from the local people about the political situation there. I'm Puerto Rican, but I have a lot of Cuban friends, and I went to school in Miami, which is obviously very connected to Cuba. So that was a great trip for me. And it was 48 hours. And I spent those 48 hours in Havana, drinking, rum and cokes, and just going to having a taxi driver show me around to different art places and discovering the Malecón and going dancing. And it was just fun. And it doesn't have to be 4 weeks. It can be a short trip. It can be local. It can be in your own neighborhood. And you can still get those benefits.
I'm so jealous of everybody who lives in Europe and like the UK for that, because you see all these like amazing 48-hour breaks. It's like, oh, I'm just going to pop off to Rome for 48 hours. And here's like me in Australia, who it's like a 20-hour flight to get anywhere. I'm like, oh, that'd be like so nice.
You and me both.
But like, you're totally right, because like I've been trying to put that mindset now in kind of like Corona times, I'm going to call it, to here, because like we're so conditioned to think that we have to like fly halfway across the world to make it like a travel vacation type thing. But like I've been trying to change my mindset to think, well, you know what, people are spending thousands of dollars to come to my island in Australia. I live here. I haven't seen any of these tourist attractions. Why aren't I taking advantage of like the waterfalls that people come to see, or like the convict history that people come to see? It's literally like 2 minutes down the road, and people are spending thousands of dollars. So why would I not be taking advantage of it too? Like, it doesn't diminish the experience, and it's still something new, and it still feels like you're like traveling and getting out of the kind of like work monotony. So yeah, why not try and change that mindset to actually enjoy traveling in your own backyard?
1000%. I think you're extremely lucky to be living in Australia. So many people, that's a bucket list destination for them. So if you're among the people that are there and you live there, count yourself like you have been blessed, like you are God's favorite.
Oh, that's nice. Well, that's the thing too, though, right? Because like, yeah, I guess that's a perfect example of kind of what I was trying to get across, is that for you, Australia is a bucket list destination. For me, I'm like, oh, like I've been in this country my whole life. For me, like Puerto Rico would be incredible. I would love to get there. For you, it's just home. So yeah, it is funny to try and change your mindset to realize, well, like this is a bucket list destination for people. So why am I not like viewing it through the same lens? Yeah, really cool.
Yeah, and I will say Puerto Rico is pretty awesome. Like, that's just not just bias on my end. In case anybody's thinking about it, it's safe to return after hurricanes, after the earthquakes, after Corona. It is a beautiful, beautiful island, and I recommend that you put it on your list for the future. So a note on sick leave. We've been talking about this and touching on this a little bit throughout the session. So a lot of people might hesitate to take their sick days. They might think, oh, I don't know, I have to really be coming down with the flu, or even then they would still come in sick. They would still work and really save it for when they are at their sickest. So first, if you are sick, 100% stay home. Like, don't even think about it. But secondly, let's say that you're just blessed to be a healthy person and you don't really have need to use your sick days physically. I want you to consider that mental health and your sanity and your well-being and your ability to cope with the pressures of work and your ability to keep moving forward without being irritable, all of that is going to be just as important as your physical endurance. So your mental wellness, your mental sanity, your mental strength that's something that you need to tend to. For me, I actually found that traveling was really helpful. So I would take a sick day to do something like that and to go somewhere and to try something different. And so I think that a lot of people feel guilty about that. But I think just like any other leave time, and especially when you have very limited leave time, you need to be aware that you've earned it, that you're entitled to it, that you might lose it, and that companies will not necessarily, if you leave your job, they're going to replace you. So you're putting all this time and this effort into something that at the end of the day is going to move on without you being there one way or the other. And any company, Apple is still moving forward without Steve Jobs. It doesn't matter how integral you are to something, it's going to move forward. So I want you to really pay the most attention and be most loyal to yourself, and understand that sometimes taking a day to go kayaking in your local river, like that is as valid of a sick day as being under the covers and, with a flu and really having a hard time. So, and nobody needs to know where you are, what you're doing. You do not owe people an explanation. You just say, I'm taking a sick day today. I don't recommend abusing this privilege, but I think it's important to understand that that time is there for you to use, and that you should not feel guilty about using it, and that it's not strictly reserved to when you are incapacitated or hospitalized or anything of the sort, especially if you're lucky enough to not necessarily need the time for those reasons and you have a program where you might lose them at the end of the year.
I think it's really important too, like absolutely what you said, and I think we are, it's been really stigmatized, obviously, mental health days in the past, but I think especially now, I know in a lot of Scandinavian countries and in Australia, we're starting to really push a trend in employment culture to recognize mental health days as part of the sick leave kind of structure and setup. As we were talking about earlier before, though, I 100% don't advise that if you are going to take a mental health day, just don't post about it on Facebook. Totally agree with you that, yeah, go out, kind of actually getting out and taking that break and resetting is totally a valid reason. But because of the perception, I think that a lot of people have, you don't exactly want to be like, hey, look at me, I'm out kayaking. When your boss is like, well, you're supposed to be sick, what the hell are you doing? There is still that perception, even though it is valid type thing. So yeah, I would just keep it off social media. You're doing it for you. You're not doing it to show everyone else how good a time you're having or brag about the fact that you got to take a day off work. We've had some interesting comments. This is what my boss hates so much, having a break and take sick leave when you're about to return to work. Yep, I've vibed with that a couple of times too. Double check that your company allows cash out during early retirement for sick days. That's cool. I haven't actually heard of that one, but that's goes to what you were saying about knowing your company policy, right? If you can actually accrue your sick days and they roll over and then you can cash them out, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then this is what most colleagues who copy me do. The truth is they call in sick leave because they don't get their flight on time. They just don't travel as smart as me. That's awesome. That's actually an interesting point because it goes to I guess when you're planning your travel days, do you plan, and I know that you're going to cover this shortly, so maybe you can just tell me that we'll cover it in a minute, but do you like to leave extra buffer time, I guess, on the end of coming home? Because so many people plan their trip and they try and maximize the whole time of the trip right up to the last second. I know that I've gone on a flight before and literally gone back to work 3 hours after I've landed, and I don't like doing that anymore, but I did it while I was young and had a bit more energy and ability to cope with those type of quick turnarounds. But I think you're already covering that though, yeah?
I will be. But yes, during the challenge, since I was so limited with my time, I did have to cut it short. I would land at 5 a.m. and I'd have to be at, back at work by 9 and a 2-hour drive away. So straight to home, switch, put on some semblance of makeup, and then stand there and pretend to be awake when mentally I'm asleep. Yep. So I learned to do that really well. But some things that helped me with that is that I would make sure that I wouldn't have major things scheduled when I got back. So I wouldn't have client meetings or, court appointments. If I could help it, I would schedule them on purpose on a different day to give myself at least a buffer day at work to catch up with emails, to get back into the swing of things before I had to be really on it. And it also helped me to have somebody at work that if anything came up was kind of an emergency, if an emergency comes up, I'll handle it for you. And I was very lucky. And I think this is something where not all your coworkers are awful people, right? Like some of them will like kind of be jealous and maybe won't want you to have fun or enjoy life, but some of them will be wonderful people. And I've had a coworker before who was a little bit older, not necessarily somebody that you would think like, oh, her and they're going to get together just fine. Like we're complete opposite people. She's the one that went to that random town in Iowa that's in the New York Times crossword puzzle. I don't know how many times. I don't even know the name of the town. She's going to be so sad if she hears that. But she covered for me. And before I went on any trip, she's like, if an emergency comes up, because I was in law, right? So I would always have a client sometimes that would come up and be like, I'm getting evicted tomorrow. Like we have 24 hours. We have to do like an emergency something. And so she's like, if there's an emergency that comes up, I will handle that emergency until you get back. And so it maybe happened once or twice, but she was there and she was a good tag team person. And when I did decide to transition, because one of my trips was actually to a travel blogger conference. And I heard that at a meeting that they were having that week when I was at the conference that they joked like, oh, we hope Jen isn't changing to a new career. And I secretly was. She bought me a book that Christmas, and it was a book about what authors make, because this was right before I published my first book. And she wrote a little inscription on it, like, go ahead, be happy. Because she knew that was something that really I enjoyed, that I was passionate about. And she was just such a wonderful, kind spirit to have. And I'm so happy and grateful that I got the office next to her. So I would encourage you to, if you do have coworkers that can be understanding, that are potentials for friends, you're spending most of your time with these people, sometimes more time than what you spend with your family. And you can get close with a lot of them, and they can be there to help you in these times if you have something like that, just as an extra buffer, just as an extra in case something happens, right? It's always good to have somebody that has your back.
Very cool. And I love this comment that just came through too. Make your exhausting job as an excuse to travel, not make your traveling as an excuse not to be in your job.
Yes, exactly. You definitely have to make sure, and for me, especially because I was a lawyer, so I wanted to make sure that I was being very responsible about all my cases. I didn't want anybody to have to pick up any of my slack, show up to hearings or anything of the sort. And I wanted my clients to feel like they were being represented and had my full attention. So that was very challenging for me. And I wanted to make sure before I left for anything, I would make sure I would clear out all my emails. I have a very thorough email forwarding set up that had all the contacts, like this is my assistant. You can contact her right away if you need something. If you need an attorney to file something on your behalf, you can contact this person that I've designated to file on my behalf. So you have to cover all your bases so that when you are gone, your presence isn't noticed because people aren't scrambling to fill in the gaps for you. You've already kind of thought of that ahead of time in whatever way you need to for your particular field.
Well, and that'd actually help you in the future taking time, like having your leave approved, right? Like if your bosses can say, well, oh, every time she goes away, she actually has it covered. It goes seamlessly. She doesn't leave us a shitstorm. And I'm assuming that would actually probably help you in your continued asking for leave type thing.
It does. And another quick note, something that helps, and not to say that I'm like a suck up or anything, but if you bring,
you said it.
If you bring souvenirs back from wherever you are for your, coworkers, they'll just like you so much more. Like if you bring macarons from Paris, or if you manage to make it back without eating all of them, good luck. Or anything like that, people will actually. Because people like food. People love free food. People love free food, especially in an office. And if you bring something that's different, that shows you thought of them, that just goes a little extra step, like people remember that. And it doesn't have to be above and beyond, especially for that coworker. If you do have that coworker that steps in, always bring them something back. I would always bring back my coworker something weird and wonderful. She loved postcards of random prisons and stuff. So I would find her. I got one from Alcatraz, and I'm like, here you go.
That's niche.
So always look out for those people that look out for you. And so making the most of your trip in terms of planning, if you are going on these short trips, if you're taking 48 hours somewhere, the first thing you need to do is make sure that you are planning ahead. You do not want to get there and be like, where am I going? How am I getting from the airport to the hotel? How am I getting to this show? What kind of times is this particular show playing? Where can I get tickets? Oh my God. all of that should have been figured out a long time ago. You only got 48 hours in this place. Like, you do not have time to sit here and plan this now. So that's part of the things where, again, just planning for your trip gives you so much anticipation and joy in the process of researching and finding fun things. Like, how cool is that you get to sit there and be like, what am I going to do with my 3 days in Rome? I don't know. Should I go to the opera? Should I go and try this fancy pasta restaurant? Like, that's fun stuff. I don't know about you, but that's how I get my jollies. So
Yeah. Oh, I've just noticed someone in the comments laughing at my use of language of shitstorm. Yes, I apologize in advance. I am Australian, and we tend to not realize the obscenities that sneak into our language.
No worries. I've been doing my best. I hopefully nothing crazy has come out.
No, you're perfect.
But you can make reservations and you can buy skip the line tickets, especially if you're going to Europe, especially if you're one of those teachers, if you're somebody with limited time, if you're traveling during peak season. Please, please, please do not spend your time waiting in line. You do not have time to spend 3 hours waiting to see the Michelangelo. You need to buy your tickets already a month, 2 months, 3 months ahead of time, depending on the attraction. Have your time that you're going in and step in within 5 minutes. Like, excuse me, VIP person here with a full-time job and no time to waste. Okay?
Love it.
Figure out transport. So that's really important. Again, getting to and from the airport, that can be your biggest money sucker. If at the end of the day, you get stuck in a taxi cab that is waiting for you when you get out of the airport, you look lost, you don't know where you're going, you don't have transportation prearranged, and then you end up paying $200 to get somewhere in the first 5 minutes of being in a new country. Like, don't make that mistake. It could be that there's a really cheap 20-minute train. You're in London and you can get to the city center with, £5 and a half hour. So make sure that you research ahead of time, that you know what you're doing, that you have your transport set up, or at least if you are going to be taking a taxi, what the regular rate is to go from your airport to that hotel area so that you're not overcharged. They always try to overcharge tourists. So just figure all that out beforehand. And also, like, write yourself down where you're going, write it in the actual language. You can just show it to them, be like, I'm going to this hotel. Like, if you're in Greece, you can just be like, here it is in your language, and this is where I'm going. So you don't waste time being like, oh, where are we? Let me pull it up on the map. None of that. Staying connected or not. So if you are going to stay connected, you can get a SIM card. I think it's the easiest if you have an unlocked phone. If you're going to be paying to stay connected just to check in with your work, that's not going to be fun times. And I'm not necessarily recommending it, because I think that you need to take that mental break, and that you need to, if you're taking the time off, take the time off. If you're going to check your email, check it once a day. But don't make it so that you're still working when you're in these fabulous places, because it negates the point of taking a trip. And red-eye flights. So another way to get the most out of it, kind of squeeze in the most trip juice that you can, is to take those overnight flights, particularly if you're going like East Coast to Europe or like West Coast to South America kind of thing, because you can just sleep on the way back, kind of prep up, get ready, and go straight into work. It's not ideal. I don't recommend it, but if you need to make the most of it, if you only have a short time, you can really do a lot with that. And those flights are cheaper too. So managing work and play. We're wrapping up. You're coming back from your trip, so you have your work buddy. You've brought them back a really fun souvenir, and you have thanked them for making sure that if anything happened, they stepped in. You have your email autoresponder. You should have that set up already before you leave. Mementos for yourself. So this is something personal that I recommend for you, because it can be really hard to go, especially if you have maybe long stretches in between the time that you can take a trip. If you only can take a trip every summer because you're a teacher or you have a particular schedule, you really want something that's going to remind you of travel, help you see that. So I like to have little things that I picked up around the world that I would put on my desk. I actually had this gourd from Peru that like everybody and their mother loved to play with. I don't understand why. It was very intricately carved, and people just really they were fascinated by it. I've told some people it was like haunted, all kinds of stuff. It was fun to see their reactions. But those are really cool things. And I would always look on my desk and see that. And it would remind me of my travels. It would really bring me into a positive space. And it would give me something to look forward to for the next time I got to take a trip. So I think that you should take the time to bring a little something from your travels, from your trip into your office space, even if it's something small. And gifts for others, like I said, because that's a great way to make friends and influence coworkers.
I really love that. Like, you are so right too, that people love food. Like, they love food. Obviously, just be like, I would say, because I've been caught with this before, just be super careful about like what food you bring back, and make sure that it actually like doesn't violate your immigration or customs codes of the country that you're coming back into. Because yeah, I've been caught up a couple of times coming back into Australia with like a ton of different like food things, and then they give you the eye. They're like, "Why are you bringing this back from South America?" You're like, "Yeah, I promise, like it's legit. I promise."
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, I guess maybe anything that's like prepackaged in your checked bag, like cookies or anything like that, like the Tim Tams you have in Australia, don't you?
Oh, so good.
That would be something I would bring back if I was coming from Australia. I think that's something a lot of people would like to try. And then schedule your days ahead of time. This is really important so that nobody can be like, oh, you didn't tell us. Oh, we didn't know. Oh, so-and-so's already taken a time off that day. The minute you know you're taking your trip, if it's for next summer, if you know, post-corona, fall 2021, you're heading out, you put that on the calendar right now, so that nobody has any excuse to say that you didn't give them sufficient notice. The minute you know, schedule your days far out ahead of time. And then it's probably going to be so far out that they won't even think about it. They won't care. They're going to be like, whatever, she's asking for 2021, whatever. So ask as far out as you can to get it on the calendar, and to make sure nobody comes up and says, right before your trip that you didn't give them enough notice. Because I've had this happen at a firm around the Christmas time with something that I had on the calendar for a long time. So just something for you to think about and to keep in mind, and to make sure everybody knows, and so that you're cleared and ready to go.
It's actually a cool negotiation tactic too, right? Like, as you said, they're like, oh shit, like it's in 2021, whatever. Okay, fine. Like, yes, you can have that leave. And then it gets like, maybe if you'd asked when it was 3 weeks out, they would have been like, no. But because you asked like a year and a half out, they don't want to be bothered with thinking about that. So they're like, yeah, okay, fine. And then you're like, look, I've had this for a year and a half. You said yes. Like, exactly. Sorry.
Exactly. Those are the little mind tactics. And we have a few, like, people are like, oh, I don't want to like have to suck up to my coworkers by bringing a gift. Why can't everyone just have the travel bug? I get it. But sometimes, you just think of it this way. You are the person that got to have the wonderful experience and go firsthand and have that time. And these people have just been sitting there, just being sad in the office, having to deal with the people calling and yelling. Just bring them a bag of candy and just smile and go about your day and plan your next trip, and be really happy that you have the travel bug and that you are that person that's having these amazing experiences. That's all I can say.
The other thing too is they can't really be like, keep having the shits with you if you come back from a trip and they want to like start like passive aggressively bullying you for having taken time off, and you come back with bags of candy to give them. It's kind of like that thing, like kill them with kindness. Like, if you're super nice, they're like, well shit, like I can't be horrible to you because you've just given me like Tim Tams from Australia. So like I can't exactly start like hurling abuse at you while I'm eating this chocolate that you bought me from like halfway across the world. And we had a comment that they vibe with your skip the line advice. So yeah, that's awesome. And then also, never for me, let them go. This is why I don't travel and post later. Yeah, totally agree with that. And that's the ultimate thing, right? Like, we're so caught up in the mindset these days that like we have to share right now. We have to let everyone know what we're doing right now. But like, do you really? Like, are you traveling for you, or are you traveling for telling everyone back home that you're having that experience? And I think that's something that we really need to like change our mindset a lot from. And it also does help you out with the whole work, kind of like coworkers knowing you're overseas type thing.
100%. I will say that I actually had a day that I took off sick to go to the Food and Wine Festival at Epcot to do a live taping of The Chew, where I got to be VIP on like TV and get food that was cooked by like these celebrity chefs, Mario Batali. And I was sitting there thinking, I have zero regrets, even if I come out on camera and they see me midday as they're, in the office and I'm here on The Chew. I'll be like, was that me? I don't know, but she was having a great time.
Amazing. It was my doppelganger. It was my twin.
And as to the gifts, even if you have that one particularly difficult person, because I had somebody in my office who I would come back and I would try to win them over, give them gifts, kind of talk about the stories. And acting was just like, no, I don't have time for this right now, all of that. But then once they saw that everyone else in the office was like interested and really supportive, by the time I had my going away party and people were asking for particular stories that they heard about, that person jumped in and started asking, because now at this point you'd won over everybody else, and it's tough to continue just being mean for no reason, which some people are, and you'll find that, especially if you're somebody that's enjoying their life, you're always going to find people that are going to be a little bit angry about that and resentful in any space, at work, at home, personal settings. So you just have to know that those people shouldn't take away from your happiness, and they definitely shouldn't make it so that you're fearful or intimidated or feeling in any way like you owe it to them not to travel and be miserable too.
I think too, like with those people who are just mean for the sake of being mean, like it's kind of like generally anyway, like if you don't give them a reaction, and like it's just kind of the basics of psychology with like any type of bullying in your life, like they're doing it because obviously like there's a lot of the time with bullying there are inadequacies or like things that they're unhappy about in their own life, and they're projecting that kind of resentment onto other people. But if they realize that they're not getting the reaction from you that they're hoping for, like if they're looking to inflict pain on somebody, even if for whatever reason, if they're not getting that reaction from you, even if it is hurting you and even if it is affecting you, don't show it. Like kind of take your own time to process those emotions and process that feeling outside of that. But if they're seeing that it's not affecting you, they're not going to keep like trying to bring you down. Like what I've realized is if you have the confidence, like throughout my life, if you have confidence to own your life, own the way you live your life, and to say, look, I'm like happy for you that you do want to be kind of tied to this ball and chain of a job. That's not the way I like to live. I'm like happy to respect your decision, but please respect mine. I'm not going to listen to this negativity and resentment because I don't want it in my life. And if you're just super confident with that, like even if you have to fake it, and even if you have to kind of just like then go into the corner and kind of like have your moment or whatever, like I've noticed that those people tend to die down and they'll try and go and project it onto someone else.
Yep. I'm laughing because I'm remembering that one specific moment where I was told, like, no, I don't have time for that story. Like, get out of here. And I just walked away like, okay, well, more candy for me. La-da-da. Like,
yeah.
And so you really have to just let it roll. And with that, I think is where travel can help you, because you will have so many wonderful things and so many good memories that even those moments of passive aggressiveness or snarkiness or resentment, it's not going to matter, because you're going to be on such a cloud from this experience that you have and this memory and these fun times. And it's always worth it. Travel is something you will never regret, even if it goes terribly, right? Like I've had some really bad mishaps while traveling. And even then afterwards, once you survive it, it's hilarious. And like, you're like, oh my God, remember that time that I looked like a homeless person? I lost my wallet and I was just emptying my bag over and over again in front of the ferry. Like, what is happening? That was fun. So I think that it's just something you will always be happy that you invested in and that you will always take with you. Nobody can ever take those memories away. It doesn't matter if you change jobs. It doesn't matter if you change careers. It doesn't matter, if you're there forever. You will always have those memories and you will never regret taking it. So I recommend that you check out my book, You Need a Vacation, How to Travel with a Full-Time Job, at this link on Amazon. It is a short book. It's meant to be just an introduction to traveling. I have 3 other books out that can give you more details on affording books, travel, or traveling by yourself. But this is meant to just help encourage you to take the time and not feel guilty about doing so.
Obviously, that's the whole reason why we had Jen on, is because she's actually written the book about this topic. Like, you're super knowledgeable about it. And that obviously, like, you can tell about like just the passion that you speak with. And so thank you so much for joining us. Where else can, like, obviously you're in the group so people can tag you and kind of keep interacting with you, but where else can people find you?
So I'm at Jen on a Jet Plane. Can it be read without Kindle? So I think you can download it and just straight to your Amazon app if you have that on your phone. If you don't have the Kindle e-reader, that should be fine. But otherwise, you can email me. So you can find me at jenonajetplane.com. You can email me at Jen Ruiz, my name, JenRuiz, at JenOnAJetPlane.com, or you can find me at the same handle, Instagram, TikTok now, Facebook, and Twitter at JenOnAJetPlane. So you have all of my information here. If for any reason you can't find the book, just shoot me an email. I'm happy to send you a digital copy. And I wanted to send a shout out to the user that loves Kinder chocolate because they have that here in Puerto Rico, and I love it too.
I'll have to look that up. I've never heard of Kinder chocolate.
So
we have like a thing in Australia called Kinder Surprise. I wonder if that's like a similar thing. That's like an egg and you have like a little plastic toy inside it.
Yeah,
like a chocolate egg. Yeah. Oh, cool.
But I think
I have to apologize.
Like a wafer.
I was going to say I have to apologize. I've just realized that I pronounced your name wrong at the start of the session. So it's Jen Ruiz. My Australian slang tends to butcher people's names at the best of times, so I apologize for that.
Not at all. So honestly, it's been Ruiz. Like, I mean, there's so many ways you can say it. Don't even sweat it. However you said it is fine, Meg.
Well, thank you so much for being here and having us. And obviously, you're an incredibly successful author, so we'll have to get you on for another live session sometime down the stage about maybe like authoring a book or something like that. We've noticed a couple of comments from people saying that they love the live session. So yeah, thank you so much for being here, and thanks everyone for logging in live.
Thank you, ladies.
Have you checked out our website? It's the go-to resource for everything solo female travel. If you identify as a woman, join our safe and private community on Facebook, Solo Female Travelers. We publish new YouTube episodes every week, so don't forget to subscribe so you're the first to know. Solo travel, but never alone. But you only get 2 days off a year. 2 and 2 is 4, so let's just go with 1, 2. Working 9 to 5. What do you plan to implement